In the first half of the 7th century BCE, the Assyrian Empire was at the height of its power, controlling the entire Fertile Crescent, establishing a faithful royal dynasty in Egypt. We will meet this Egyptian dynasty very soon in the next unit of this course. It seems that there was no power in the world that could stand against the Assyrian Empire's military might. The age of the Pax Assyriaca, the forced Assyrian peace all over the world, was the major reason for the flourishing of the economy and commerce in the region of Syria, the land of Israel, and Transjordan. Strong intercultural connections were forged. However, within several years, the Assyrian Empire collapsed and fell, never to rise again. In all the ancient history, this was one of the most impressive and renowned falls, a rapid military process where a great power failed and crushed from the height of its influence, might, and wealth within a short time, subsequently disappearing totally from the stage of history. A singular Babylonian document explains the destruction of the Assyrian Empire as the revenge of the gods for the previous subjugation of Babylon and the destruction of the Babylonian urban centers and temples. This explanation is well known and familiar from many biblical explanations for destructions and punishments of Israel's enemies. Historically, the Assyrian Empire fell in the wake of its failure to solve what scholars define as the Babylonian problem. The Assyrian failure to put an end to the repeated revolts that broke out in Babylonia, which had intensified during the reign of one of the last Assyrian kings, Sin-Shar-Ishkun. He ruled between 627 and 612 BCE. Leaving aside theological and political explanations, focusing on the historical facts, it seems that the starting point for the historical process, which ended in the fall of the Assyrian Empire, is the death of the Assyrian king Ashur-etel-Ilani in 627 BCE, the son and successor of Ashur-banipal after only 4 years of rule. His son and heir, Sin-Shar-Ishkun, succeeded to the throne, but a short time later, Sin-Shumlishir, one of the generals in the Assyrian army, revolted against him. Sin-Shumlishir succeeded in taking control of the cities in northern Babylonia, among them Babylon and Nippur, and he apparently ruled in Babylon for 3 months before being defeated by the army of Sin-Shar-Ishkun. One may assume that Nebuchadnezzar, who will shortly become the first king of the Neo-Babylonian kingdom, made use of those events to strengthen his power in southern Babylonia. There are some clues, and we can speculate that there was a treaty between the different rivals of the Assyrian king Sin-Shar-Ishkun, the Babylonians and the Assyrians, between Nabopolassar and Sin-Shumlishir, and it can be that they collaborated in the revolt against Assyria, each from the territory where he ruled. It can be, however, that Nabopolassar only exploited the revolt by Sin-Shumlishir to strengthen his power. In any case, only after the fall of Sin-Shumlishir, Nabopolassar initiated a revolt of his own against the Assyrians. In the Babylonian Chronicles, we have detailed report on the events of these years, including exact dates. From the report in the Babylonian Chronicles, we know that in the summer of 626 BCE, in parallel with the assault on the city of Nippur, the armies of Nabopolassar conquered Babylon from the garrison of Sin-Shar-Ishkun, who was camped there after suppressing the revolt of Sin-Shumlishir, which has ended several months earlier. The Assyrian response came very soon after. A few weeks later, during the months of Tashritu, around October 626 BCE, the Assyrian army managed to reconquer Nippur and to pursue Nabopolassar to Uruk without succeeding in conquering the city. At the same time, another Assyrian force was sent out to reconquer Babylon. However, this force was defeated by Nebuchadnezzar's army. This was the last Assyrian attempt to capture the city of Babylon and the end of a prolonged period during which the city's residents fought for their independence. As a result of these battles and Nebuchadnezzar's success in establishing his power in Babylon and Uruk, he officially ascended the throne on the 26th of the month of Ar-Hashamnu, which is the 22nd or the 23rd of November, 626 BCE, even though his rule had been recognized previously by most of the cities in Babylonia. This was the end of an era when, according to the Babylonian Chronicle, there was no king in the land. Let me take a short time out and explain why I can't tell if the 26th of the month of Ar-Hashamnu is equivalent to the Georgian date of the 22nd or the 23rd of November, 626 BCE. The reason is that, according to the Mesopotamian practice, the day started after the sunset and ended with its setting on the following day. When the date is converted into the Georgian calendar, where the day changed at midnight, one must count the date of the evening between the sunset and the midnight, as well as the date of the following day until the sunset. During the next 2 years, 625 and 624 BCE, the Assyrians tried to suppress Nebuchadnezzar's revolt, concentrating their efforts particularly in northern Babylonia. In the Babylonian Chronicles, from the first year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, about April 25 to March 624 BCE, there is a description of the campaign conducted by the Assyrians toward Sippar. Apparently, the city had been conquered by the Assyrians, despite the fact that this is not mentioned in the Chronicles, nor is it the fact that Nebuchadnezzar's army failed to conquer Nippur in the summer of 625 BCE. The events of the next year, between April 624 and March 623 BCE, followed by the withdrawal of Assyria from Babylonia, proclaimed the beginning of the end of the empire. In the beginning of the month of Elul in Hebrew, August 624 BCE, an additional Assyrian offensive war blocked by the Babylonians, one that apparently had been designated to seize control of the main route to Nippur and to relieve the Assyrian garrison stationed there. The Assyrian weakness paved the way for a revolt by the city of Der, located close to the border of Babylonia and Elam. It was around summer 623 BCE. Apparently, at this time, Elam also withdrew of the Assyrian yoke. The Assyrians had to respond quickly while the revolt spread, and in the fall of that year, around September 623 BCE, Sin-Shar-Ishkun concentrated vast efforts toward the destruction of the power of Nebuchadnezzar, and he tried to suppress the revolts that had begun in the other cities of Babylonia. The Assyrian offensive was successful. The Babylonian attempt to capture Nippur failed, and in the counter-offensive, the Assyrians succeeded in taking Uruk. However, in this crucial time, a revolt that started from within, probably by the Assyrian commander in the west, completely transformed the situation. The Assyrian offensive in Babylonia was blocked, and Sin-Shar-Ishkun left Babylonia with his entire army to combat the serious internal threat. Apparently, after 100 days of battle, the Assyrian king was successful in suppressing the revolt, and he continued to rule until 612 BCE. However, this revolt had a serious effect on the power and status of the Assyrians in the regions across the river, as it did in Babylonia, because this enabled Nebuchadnezzar to capture the last Assyrian strongholds remaining in central Babylonia and to establish his control throughout the land. Remember this date. It was not by chance that in Judah, King Josiah initiated his cultic reform in his 18th year as a king, which is exactly 622 BCE. You can check me by reading the second book of Kings, chapter 22, verse 3, as well as chapter 23, verse 23. It seemed that during these years, Assyria withdrew from all of its footholds in the region across the river, where Egypt had entered and established its status as a sort of successor state. We will deal with this region and with this period in the next unit of this course. At the end of October 622 BCE, the Babylonian siege of Uruk had begun, and after several setbacks, when the city passed from hand to hand during the year 620 BCE, it ultimately fell to Nebuchadnezzar. Nippur was apparently also conquered at that same year. Thus, Assyria was driven back from its last outposts in Babylonia, and Nebuchadnezzar was able to firmly establish his rule over the entire country. From that moment, the Babylonian kingdom developed rapidly and within several years was able to take part in Assyria's final annihilation. The next clay tablet of the Babylonian Chronicle is the so-called God Chronicle that was published already in 1923 AD. It describes events between the 10th and the 17th year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, which is between 616 and 609 BCE. According to the description in the Chronicle, in the late spring and over the summer of 616 BCE, the Babylonians were successful in pushing the Assyrians back toward the middle Euphrates and reaching the Balikh River. At this stage, the Egyptian army arrived to the aid of Assyria. Again, in the next unit of this course, we will describe the connections between the 26th dynasty in Egypt and Assyria, and the history of the relations between the two empires. But let me just state in this point that there is no evidence for the presence of the Egyptians in northern Syria before 616 BCE. Apparently, the presence in the whole region between Ribla and Carchemish transpired only after the final weakening of Assyria, which led to the situation where the Babylonian forces had already reached the middle Euphrates. In any case, the Egyptian king Psammetichus I, who ruled between 664 and 610 BCE, was in the middle of the process of establishing his rule over the coastal regions of Syria, Lebanon, and the land of Israel. He was well aware of the advantage in the continued existence of Assyria, which had lost its power. The weakened Assyria didn't pose a threat to his reign in the areas under his control. Assyria served as a kind of buffer between Egypt and the Medes and Babylonians, who were becoming powerful in the east at that time. It would seem that the Egyptian ruler understood the danger posed to his rule if Assyria were to disappear from the map, and he consequently tried to support it.